All right, we are in 3rd John, finishing up tonight, hopefully. All right, so let's just read the book again. It's only 15 verses very quickly, and then we'll be picking back up in verse 9. It says, "The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth, beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified of your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, it is a faithful thing that you do in all of your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified of your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. I have written something to the church about Diotrephes, who loves to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers and also stops those who want to and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone, and from the truth itself we also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. I have much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends, each by name." All right. So this letter is written, as we talked about last week, to Gaius, and he has what has seemed to have prompted the letter is his treatment of visiting missionaries as they came through town, and how he has helped them and taken care of them, and word of that now has reached John. And so he's writing this letter, and he's encouraging him in that. And then he starts talking to him, where we pick up tonight, talking about Diotrephes, an individual in the church. Exactly who he is, well, to be honest with you, we just don't know. It'd be very easy to imagine that he's a leader in the church of some kind, okay? But if you've ever been around certain church dynamics, then you know that it doesn't take... You can have somebody who's pulling the strings and running a church without being in a leadership position, okay? I wish that were not true, but that sadly is true. If you've, well, I'll just leave it there. It has been done in churches where people are calling shots, who don't have the right to be doing that, number one. And number two, they're lifting themselves up, and they're being driven by what they want and by what they need and what is most convenient to them. And there's a reason why one of the qualifications of elders is that he is not self-willed. He's not self-focused. He's not focused only upon, matter of fact, rarely does he focus upon himself. He spends his life focused on other people and what brings out the best in them. And so we have this Diotrephes, and apparently John has written to the church. Whether this has reference to, say, like 1 John, the book, maybe he sent 1 John to the congregation where Diotrephes is, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it, or it's some letter dealing with something else completely independent. Whatever it is, Diotrephes does not acknowledge our authority. Now, does anybody's translation have something other than authority, like he does not acknowledge us, maybe, or does everybody have authority in verse 9? Okay, that's probably closer. I was looking, I'd forgotten to look, but in the original text, there's no word here for authority. Yeah, preeminence, okay. And so when you get into translating, trying to communicate exactly. Now, do I think what John meant when he wrote, he does not receive us, do I think that means he was rejecting their authority? Yes, I do think that's what it means. But just as a note, the word authority itself, there's no corresponding word in the Greek text that word is translated from. Okay? So, but it does, I believe, capture the essence of what John was saying when he wrote it, when he says he does not receive us. Now, the reason why he does not receive them is because he likes to put himself first. This is two words that are put together. There's a word, the first word is one of the words for love, and the other one is the word protos, first. Okay? So he loves to be first, is the idea. And I mean, that's a problem. The word protos is used in a lot of different ways throughout the New Testament and other secular Greek writings. But in New Testament concepts, many times protos has to do with leaders standing before, leading. And the fact that he loves that in the sense that he wants his way. That's where this becomes an issue. Okay? When something has to be my way, and it always has to be my way, and it always has to be considered to me, and it always has to be run by me, that's where we start running into problems. Okay? The church is bigger than any one person. And anyone who truly loves the church and loves the Lord knows that that's how it works. That, as a matter of fact, you put the majority ahead of yourself. Okay? And so because Diotrephes, for whatever reason, he wants, whether he sees himself as the gatekeeper or he just wants all decisions to be run by him, for whatever reason, that he's developed this idea in the church that everything has to have his sign off and his approval. One of the things that through the years that I've run into is sometimes people will ask me, well, they will come to me and say, can we do this as the church? And my honest answer to them is, I don't know. I don't have the authority to make that decision. Okay? We are not what would consider to be a pastoral model of church government. Okay? And I'm using pastoral in the sense that it's commonly used in other religious groups, where you may have a board of lay elders, you may have a deacon board, you may have something along those lines, but basically the pastor serves as a CEO, basically. I mean, he's involved in budgeting, he's involved in literally every decision the church makes, and to be honest with you, I don't know how they do it, and I don't know why they'd want to do it. But that's not the model that exists here, okay? Because I don't think that's the model that is what is put forward in the New Testament as how it should be operated. And so there are things, can we do them? I don't know. That's beyond my purview, okay? Now, does that stop certain people? Has it ever stopped? And by the way, let me just make this sidebar as well. An elder himself has no authority. You understand what I'm saying? An elder by himself has no authority. Authority is not invested in that one individual to make decisions. Authority is invested in the group of men together. That's God's internal checks and balances system. To where, and people say, well, what happens if an elder goes rogue? Well, the other elders have the responsibility of holding that elder accountable. Each elder is to be submissive to the eldership of which they are a part. Okay? And so they don't have the authority. And so we can get into this mode, and most people who violate this command are usually driven by positional leadership. They want position because they think position equals power. And to a degree, position can bring power. But people who lead solely from their position are awful leaders. Nobody wants to work for them. Nobody wants to serve alongside them. They simply lord their power over people, and nobody likes it. Okay? Whereas leadership at its highest level, and that Jesus came to bring, was permissional leadership, as Maxwell would call it. That is, I follow you because I want to. You are leading us in a direction. You are the type of man that I want to follow. I believe that your heart is always in the right place. Whether or not we agree with every decision along the way, that matters absolutely nothing, because we're never going to agree with every decision along the way. But in believing that the person's heart is in the right place and operating from that model in how we handle things it's important. And a lot of people, they throw around this term Diotrephes pretty loosely. They'll say, well, this person is Diotrephes. Let me tell you something. I've met a Diotrephes or two in my lifetime. The people that I often hear compared to Diotrephes are nothing like Diotrephes. Okay? Nothing. And so here he is, as a man, rejecting John. Okay? And by the way, that's not just rejecting John like, okay, I don't like you, John. It's bigger than that. In rejecting John, what is John's position? What is his office? He's an apostle. If you reject John's counsel as an apostle, you reject God. This is what Jesus meant. He who receives you receives me. He who rejects you rejects me. That's not said of me and you. That's said of Jesus and his apostles. And so when we look at the text of Scripture and we say, well, the red words are the most important words, that's absolute foolishness. The words written by the apostles are the words of God himself. They are as authoritative as the red words of Jesus. And so when we look at Scripture and we say, I know that's what it says, but I think we're going to do something else, that's rejecting the authority of God. And so it's a very big problem. And it's not one that we need to take lightly. And so John says, he doesn't acknowledge us. He doesn't acknowledge our authority. So if I come, he's hoping to come and make a visit, which of course he says at the end, I will bring up what he's doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers and also stops those who want to and puts them out of the church. Okay, so he's kind of the policeman of the church. And so just take the back part of this verse and we'll come back to the beginning part in just a minute. He refuses to welcome brothers. That is what Gaius has been doing in welcoming missionaries, helping them and sending them on their way. Diotrephes refuses to do that. And he goes even further and says, if he sees someone else trying to help other missionaries, he tells them to stop. And beyond that, if he tells them to stop and they don't do it, he thinks he's going to kick them out of the church. And the word literally means to throw out. Okay? It's two words, one for out and one for throw, to throw them out. Like John 9:34 and 35, when they're going to throw people out of the synagogue for believing in Jesus. And so he's putting himself in this position that he determines, he kind of serves as the, quote, gatekeeper. All right? And one of the things we have to be cautious of is that we don't play the gatekeeper. God is the gatekeeper. Jesus, that's the way he puts himself. He's the door to the sheepfold, John 10. He's the one who determines who belongs to him and who doesn't, and whether they should go in or out. That's not our job. So Diotrephes is putting himself in a position that's above his pay grade. And that's something we have to be very cautious of. That we're not making decisions, that we're not insisting on things, that we're not doing certain things that put us in a position to where we're making decisions well beyond our pay grade. Now, to the first part of the verse. He says, if I come, I will bring up what he's doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I have a hard time with bullies in general. Bullies don't scare me, they make me mad. And I really have to watch myself because I have a tendency that just says, we're finna lock horns. If you think you're going to come in here and run over people, me and you are finna lock horns. I cannot stand it. And this is how bullies work. This is their MO. Bullies run their mouth big, but you put them in a room with just you and them, and you ask them about what they've been saying, they are as squirmy and as cowardly as the day is long. They talk big behind the back. They have a lot of jokes at your expense. They talk about how stupid you are and how ignorant you are and how awful your decisions are until it's time to sit down across the table and look at each other and say, now wait a minute. This is what I've heard you say. I need to know if it's true. Well. No. It's either a yes or it's a no question. You said this or you didn't. You did this or you didn't. One of the biggest things that a bully is banking on is for no one to call his or her bluff. They're banking on it. And John the Apostle is saying, if I come, we're going to talk. Paul does the same thing. People were accusing him of just that. They were saying, his letters, he's tough when it comes to writing letters, but in person, he's a weak guy. And Paul said, well, when I come, we'll figure that out. We'll see how weak I really am. You see, a lot of people and bullies, because they only understand one way, which is to run over people like a dump truck and a freight train, they mistake gentleness in others as weakness. Gentleness is strength. Gentleness is true strength. Because it means you can control how you feel and that your emotions don't run you. You've got control over them. Strength, just let out and let loose, that's weakness. That's weakness. Anybody can do that. It's called a temper tantrum. And so Diotrephes is this person. He's talking great blasphemous things. He says great things against other people. He says, don't help them, and if you do, you're out of here. And what's amazing to me is that so many times, and apparently what's going on here, is that there are people sitting aside watching him and letting him do it. They're letting him do it. Where are the other leaders in the church while he's doing this? Where are the other members of the church saying, no, that's not how this is going to work? So, John, and it could be that Gaius maybe was one of those members that Diotrephes has thrown out. You see the inner workings of their relationship. Gaius is praised because he's helping missionaries. Diotrephes is saying, no, you can't help them. If you help them, I'm throwing you out. It could be that Gaius is one that has been thrown out by Diotrephes. He's gotten everybody to turn their back on him and to reject him and to shun him. And here is look, I don't mean it to be a depressing truth, but I do mean it to be a truth that we need to understand. On the whole, Christian people are the most wonderful people I've ever been around in my life. But I'm going to tell you, if you get a mean one, they're meaner than anybody in the world if they go sour. I mean, as mean can be. And we need to seriously guard ourselves against that. Because it can happen to anybody. I don't think Diotrephes probably got up one day and said, I think I'm going to be a Jesus jerk today. But eventually, that's what he became. And so John calls attention to it and says, I'm going to handle it. So then in verse 11, as he returns to discussing or talking to Gaius, he says, beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. In the context, the evil and the good is, the evil is not helping these missionaries, the good is helping them. Okay? And he goes on to say, whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. The similar terminology from the first letter. To be a generous person, to be a hospitable person, is to be like God. Okay? God is the most generous, hospitable, welcoming, and gracious being that there is. And that's who we have to become, is gracious and generous and hospitable and kind and gentle. That's what shows progress in Christian faith, is how we are and how we treat other people and how we extend our generosity to other people. And I mean, obviously I'm not downplaying being financially generous, but generosity is much bigger than just handing money over. Being generous with time, with gifts, with opportunities, with all different types of things. So, he says then in verse 12, Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself, and we also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. Demetrius most likely is one of these traveling missionaries. He's probably bringing this letter to Gaius. And so what he's saying is, under the law, 2 or 3 witnesses. So he's received a good testimony from everyone. That is, he has a solid reputation from everywhere he's ever been in the work that he does. The truth itself, you look at his life, it lines up with what the truth is. And I'm telling you, as an apostle, that he is a good man and that you should help him in the process. You should receive him, extend hospitality to him, and help him on his way as he does his missionary efforts, as he goes about his missionary efforts. And so he's encouraging guys not to. So there's this tendency, if you try and do the right thing, and you take heat for doing the right thing. Not every time, but there are times when you take heat for doing the right thing, and in a moment where you're down and frustrated, you look at it and go, you know what? Forget it. You don't seem to be concerned about doing anything right. Why should I be? You can't beat them, just join them. You kind of wonder if maybe that's not what's going on with Gaius, who's like, look, man, I'm just trying to help people as they preach the gospel, and I've been thrown out of the church for this. You kind of wonder if John is not a little bit worried about that, thinking, no, you're doing the right thing. And I want to encourage you to keep doing the right thing. And don't let someone's mistreatment of you for doing the right thing discourage you from doing the right thing. So, then he draws the conclusion, which is very similar to the previous letter in 2 John. I had much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. That is, I'd like to talk about a lot more, but, I kind of chuckled to myself because I can almost see John here as like a typical man in communication because, okay, if you've ever seen a man with his phone texting and a woman with her phone texting, you know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? There are times when I think that phone is going to explode. I mean, teeth are gritted and we're just on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And then she will send something to say her husband, and what's his response? Okay. That's the difference in the way we communicate, by the way. We don't have to fight each other over that. We're just different. Okay? But John is just saying there are other things I'd rather talk about face to face. And, there are certain conversations that need to be had face to face. They don't need to be had over text message, email. They don't even need to be had over FaceTime or anything else. They need to be had person to person. And we need to, by the way, that is becoming an incredibly lost art. I think it's obvious. I think it's very much a biblical truth that says you need to go and talk to the person, and you need to actually see them face to face as you talk to them. But it is a lost art to where if I've got something uncomfortable, I'm just going to send you a message or do something along those lines. No. You're going to learn to have difficult conversations. Okay? You're going to learn what it means to go and talk to somebody. Because there are things that are too important. I can only imagine what my dad would have done to me if I dared to break up with someone over a text message. He would have literally killed me. I would be dead at least twice. There are certain things you just don't do. And there are certain things you do. You have to have, it's character developing that you do them. And here's the thing, hard conversations are never going to go away in life. So it's better now that we learn how to have them. And that we learn that there are certain things that fit into different categories, knowing when to use what mode of communication. And John is saying, there are some important things I want to talk to you about, but I'm not going to write about them. I'm going to see you soon. We'll talk face to face, literally in the original mouth to mouth. And then he closes with the typical greeting. The friends greet you. Greet the friends each by name. That is, they all know each other, and the importance of greeting each other, knowing each other. There is an assumption in all of the letters of the New Testament. Well, in all of the New Testament, you see it more predominant in the letters. But there is an assumption in all of the New Testament that the church is intimately acquainted with one another. That the church knows nothing of, I go in, slide in, try not to talk to anybody, and I slide out and try not to talk to anybody. They wouldn't understand that at all. And it's not just a cultural difference of a Mediterranean culture versus an American culture. I'll just say this and then we'll be done with the letters of John. The relationships that exist, listen, we were made for relationship. The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit have for all eternity existed in what they call the divine dance, this loving relationship and intimacy that existed. One of the most famous Christian pieces of Christian art is a picture of the Godhead, and they're all three pictured as human beings, but they're sitting around a table. The idea of divine communion. Why are you and I made for relationship? Look, when God said about Adam in the garden, it's not good that man should be alone, He wasn't saying it's good that he's not married. It's not good that he's not married. That's not what He said. He meant it's not good that man should exist without relationship. Because that's who God is. God has always existed in relationship. And that directly impacts. And so as we began 1 John when it says that which was from the beginning and all of these empirical senses, and he says, we're writing these things to you so that you may have fellowship with us, and truly our fellowship is with the Father and His Son Jesus Christ. There's that divine dance, the Godhead moving together in community and then inviting us into that community to move in divine community. And all throughout these letters, John is concerned with anything that could disrupt or threaten this community moving together. But it's all founded upon the premise that we're together. We're connected. Which means I don't think spending time with other Christians is torture. But if you think it is, well, next week we're going to start talking about Job, and he talked a lot about suffering. So, maybe we can learn to suffer through dealing with people. But anyway, we will move on to Job hopefully next week.